Hello and welcome to this edition of the 14 Podcast. I'm Chris Lee. Trey Wallace of Outkick joins me. Trey, thanks for joining us at a busy time. Boy, what a crazy time for SEC football, not just on the field stuff, but coaching things and whatever. This season has been everything you would hope it would have been in terms of excitement and storylines so far.
Chris, good to join you, buddy. No, I agree. Look, it wouldn't be Southeastern Conference football if there wasn't a bunch of crazy things going on during the season and especially off the field. And that's what we've gotten over the last, month and a half. So we're here, 3 weeks left in the regular season. Can't believe it's flown by this fast, but lots of stuff to discuss.
Let's start in Gainesville. The Dan Mullen situation got worse. I think you and I talked. I never dreamed for a minute that they were going to lose to South Carolina, which they did. Is an 18, 19-point favorite and just got clocked. That was 30-10 at the half. Dan Mullen has fired his defensive coordinator, Todd Grantham, as long as an offensive line coach, in addition, who's been with him, I think, 18, 19 years. What do you make of that situation where it's headed? Is that something where he's thrown enough people on the altar to save his job? I know the buyout's $12 million and they've got to pay, I think, half of it within 60 days. Where do you think this is headed with Dan Mullen?
I think we got the whole, hey man, you know what? You better get rid of some assistant coaches and make some changes or you're going to be on the chopping block. It reminds me of the same thing that happened at Nebraska, Chris, where Scott Frost was promised he'd go to get to 2022 and had a reduction in contract pay and buyout, but he lets go of 5 assistant coaches right after that announcement is made. I look at what is going on in Gainesville, Chris, and I just think this thing is a little bit out of control. I think the players have completely checked out. You could see that in that game against South Carolina. And it wouldn't surprise me if Scott Strickland and Dan Mullen had a conversation on Sunday. It was like, hey, man, look, what do you want to do here? Like, I don't want to fire you, but you've got to change something up. And I think that's what you saw with John Hevesy being let go. He's been with Dan Mullen for a long time. And you saw Todd Grantham get let go. But that's the thing, though, Chris, those aren't the only problems that are going on in the program. They've got 4 other coaches with expiring contracts right now. And I just look at what Dan Mullen's trying to do, and I think this maybe buys him another year. But, I wrote about this earlier, on Tuesday. If they drop a game to Missouri or Florida State, that conversation changes real quick.
You made a good point, too. He is working for the same AD who I think hired him at Mississippi State. So yeah. I do wonder how that plays into it, if he might not get some favor that he might not get under another AD.
No, I agree completely. I think he absolutely gets some favor. I mean, I hate to make this comparison again, but you look at Nebraska. They haven't had a winning season since Scott Frost has been there. You look at Florida. Yeah, they've had some winning seasons, but this is not Florida football. Florida football is supposed to be competing for national championships, and right now Dan Mullen's not doing it, and I don't see them doing it in the next 3 to 4 years. So I do. I think that relationship with Scott Strickland really paid off when it came to Dan Mullen, because you look around the country at premier programs, especially at a place like Florida, they don't accept things like this. Yep. And especially off of a 40-17 loss to a third-string quarterback at South Carolina, things are not well in Gainesville right now. And honestly, Chris, I don't know if they're ever going to turn around under Mullen. I don't think they will.
You said Florida football did not look like Florida football on Saturday. Alabama football didn't look like Alabama football either, frankly.
Nope. They, I think they had 3 rushing yards, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have the stats pulled up, but I think it was 2 or 3 rushing yards on Saturday. Look, Alabama is and I've tried to tell a couple people this. Alabama is not as good as what you've seen in the past. It's like you can't put this Alabama team up against the teams that you've seen in the last 4 to 5 to 6, 7, 8 years, however you want to put it. They have weaknesses in the secondary, weaknesses at the linebacker spot. You saw where LSU came out invigorated, ready to fight Saturday night in Tuscaloosa, and you give credit to that staff at LSU and the players for buying in and going in there and trying to pull the upset. But, I just think, look, this Alabama football program, They're very beatable, and I think if and we've already seen that this season, but I think if Georgia and Alabama played on Saturday for the SEC title, I think Georgia would win that game by 14 points. I just don't think this is the same Alabama team, and I think Nick Saban knows that. So I'm very interested to see how the rest of the season plays out. And there's a game looming, by the way, with Auburn. I know Auburn dropped that game against Texas A&M, but man, when it comes to the Iron Bowl, you throw the records out the window.
That brings up another topic. I don't think this is vintage Alabama. I think it's a great team. I don't think it's an elite team. But you look across the college football playoff landscape, I'm not bought into Oregon, which struggled with Washington. I'm not bought into Cincinnati, which is struggling with Tulsa-type teams too much. Ohio State's defense has not been great, and, they've not been tremendous at times. I don't think I buy into Oklahoma. These are good teams, right? But you're talking about playoff level teams. I think it's Georgia, and then it's a bunch of question marks after that.
No, I agree completely. I mean, you look at what Michigan. It was the only Michigan State thing that could have happened this past weekend by them going to Purdue and losing. And Purdue has this knack of like beating undefeated teams that come in there. They did that against Ohio State a few years ago. So Michigan State falls off. They're done. You look at the rest of the conference. I don't think Ohio State is good enough to hang with the Georgia defense. Oregon's darn sure not good enough. Oklahoma, no. I mean, maybe they get lucky a little bit on offense, but honestly, I mean, I agree with you. I think, the college football rankings will prove at the end of the season that Georgia's in the spot that they need to be at number 1. And honestly, I think 2 through 4 is a crapshoot, because whoever gets Georgia in that first playoff game, it's not going to go well. And honestly, as we sit here right now, it would not surprise me if the SEC does not get 2 teams in to the playoff, like a lot of people thought they would with Alabama. I just think Bama either is going to lose to Auburn somehow, or they're going to get beat up by Georgia and it's going to knock them out, and then it's just going to be Georgia representing the conference. So interesting times of the college football playoff. And I agree to the Cincinnati thing. Like, I love the story.
Yeah.
I like the coach. I like everything that goes into what Cincinnati is doing, but you had an opportunity to beat up on a bad Tulsa team this past weekend, not up to standards of the rest of college football, and you kind of dug yourself a little bit more of a hole that you were already in. So I'm interested to see how this thing plays out, because there is an opportunity where they could slip into 4, but they got to start playing a little bit better football, even though they're undefeated.
I don't know how many people are talking about this, but what happens if A&M runs the table and Alabama loses to Georgia or Auburn? Well, I guess if they lost to Auburn and A&M runs the table, then A&M is in the title game. But I'm wondering, does A&M have a back door if it runs the table, given it beat Alabama head-to-head? I mean, I think I think it's unlikely, but it's something I've been thinking about.
How do you put a 2-loss team, though, in a spot over an undefeated team from a Power 5 conference?
Okay, let me clarify. Somebody would have to slip up and lose at some point, right?
Yeah, and we could see that happening. I mean, what? Ohio State could slip up against Michigan, or, something could happen to make things interesting. I think it would. I think there's like a 40% chance that maybe something like that happens. Some things would have to go their way. But I also think that you really, you look back at Jimbo Fisher, and he squandered that national championship against that game against Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Because if they beat Mississippi State, we're talking about the Aggies playing for a college football playoff spot. Even, I know they beat Alabama, okay? But I'm saying in general, we're talking about what? 3 teams that could be, in the running for a college football playoff spot in the SEC if only Mike Leach wouldn't have gone to College Station and messed things up.
Of all the years that we could have had the 12-team system, I think this year would be fascinating. You just have so many teams out there. I mean, Cincinnati would be in at that point. A 2-loss A&M team would probably make it in. I just think this year of all years, that would be tremendously entertaining.
It'd be a lot of fun, but I think we would know who the national champion
Well,
was.
I think we already do.
Right. Well, I've said this to a couple people, and I've mentioned it to you and another good friend of ours. I don't know if the state of Georgia has sold their soul to the devil, or they can get 2 titles in 1 year. So we'll see what the football gods have in store for the Georgia Bulldogs, since the Braves already got that title. So, we'll see how that plays out. But no, I agree. I think we know who, right now is the leading candidate. But I will say there are ways you can beat Georgia. It's tough, but you've got to get after Stetson Bennett, or you got to get after JT Daniels. And if you do that, you force them into some turnovers. I think they'll see an offense this weekend that they haven't seen in a long time. That's Tennessee. And I'm not saying Tennessee's going to beat Georgia, but what I am saying is I think you're going to see more offense out of a team against Georgia that you've seen all season.
Yeah, look, there are some cracks in Georgia. Now, they are all on one side of the ball. Defense, good luck finding them, right? Because they've given up, I think they've had 5 games where they haven't given up an offensive touchdown. I mean, that's crazy. The Clemson game,
yeah, defensive touchdowns.
Yeah, including the Clemson game. But Stetson Bennett doesn't have to do too much, right? They get a big lead every game. I just still am not sold. Their running game, and maybe you could say it's Missouri, and they knew they were going to waltz, which they were. But Missouri, you and I could run for 100 yards against Missouri right now, and they average 5 point something a carry. Again, maybe it's who they were playing, and they didn't need to do much. But I look at that offense at times, and yards per play numbers are pretty good, and they don't have to put up a lot of sustained drives because of the defense. But I mean, I just kind of jokingly crowned them national champions a minute ago. But when I do watch that offense, I do have some questions. They don't have a dominating running back. They've got a lot of good ones, but it's not your typical college football playoff champion type of offense.
No, it's not. And look at the teams that they beat during that stretch, where it was like, whoa. They beat Arkansas, which, okay, we've seen where Arkansas is now after those 2 wins against A&M and Texas to kind of open the year. We've seen what Kentucky is now, who have lost 3 straight football games. You look at Auburn. We see what Auburn is right now, where if they can't get anything running the football and have to rely on Bo Nix the entire time, things aren't going to go their way. So you look at that 3-stack win, and then they beat Florida, which we know what Florida is right now. It's interesting because I don't want to say there's not an impressive win from Georgia because they've been dominating every single game. But what I am saying is I think the opponents turned out to be not as good as what they were ranked at the time.
Yeah.
And now I'm interested to see, what Georgia can do against a high-speed, up-tempo offense like Tennessee. And if they can do that, if they can take care of that, there's not a team in the country that's going to run an offense that's going to scare Georgia. And I think it also comes down to what happens in the run game. Do they get Kendall Milton back from his knee injury that he suffered, a little slight MCL injury? Because it's interesting if they have to rely on Cook, and Zamir White, how far they can take them, along with Stetson. So, interesting.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see that Tennessee game because if Tennessee plays with them into the third quarter, I'm not shocked. I'll tell you what worries me is that box score, which was one of the craziest ones I've ever seen. They give up, 6-14 to Kentucky. Now, granted, that's because Kentucky had 100 snaps or whatever. So you got to take that into account. But yeah. I think that, first of all, Tennessee, talk about a team that would like to have a season to do over from the start, the Pitt and the Florida games. And I'm sure a lot of people can say that, but just as a point there, I don't know. I think that game, especially with it being in Knoxville, might be a little bit more interesting than people are thinking. And I think you make a good point. I don't think they've seen an offense like Tennessee's yet.
Well, Kirby Smart talked about it. It's going to be hard to practice for this thing. It's going to be hard to simulate that. And that's understandable, which it is. Kirby said he's watched a lot of tape on Tennessee, and I'm sure they have. Georgia's played a lot of noon games this year. But when you look at it, Tennessee would have to have a lot of things go right to be within 14 in the fourth quarter, I think, just because of how powerful that defensive line is from Georgia. But I will say this. Tennessee has some really good wide receivers that can force separation with the Georgia secondary that I don't think is one of the best in the country. I think Georgia's secondary is top 10. I don't think they're number one, number two in the country in that secondary, but it's that defensive line, the linebackers to put pressure. The biggest thing for me is how does Hendon Hooker play?
Yeah.
And what do they get out of Javonte Payton and Velus Jones Jr.? I mean, you look at that Kentucky game, man. I was there and I was stunned. They scored 2 touchdowns on 3 plays, and you're like, wow, okay, they can hit real quick. And I think that's what Josh Heupel's tried to bring to what the offensive game plan has been. And I agree with you on the part that, yeah, Tennessee fans would love to have those first 2 losses back, because I think if Hendon Hooker is your starter, they at least beat Pittsburgh. I don't know if they beat Florida, in Gainesville, but they at least beat Pittsburgh. So, the matchup on Saturday, it's all going to depend on the running game. If Tennessee could somehow establish a running game, and I'm talking 80 to 100 yards, Tyler Beatty got most of his yards later on in the game when it was garbage time. But if they can establish some kind of running game, that could give them a little hope, maybe take them into the third quarter.
Okay, a couple games left we haven't talked about. Ole Miss A&M, fascinating because you got – if Ole Miss got healthy, I'd really like to see that game. But A&M, that defensive line just stuffed anything and everything Auburn brought its way. I think that one will be fun to watch. My concern is that they won't be able to protect Matt Corral against a defensive line that just made Bo Nix's life miserable.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that A&M is playing really, really well on defense right now, especially getting pressure along the quarterback. Yeah, Matt Corral can try to scramble outside the pocket, but the thing is, I think the Aggies are pretty darn good at the corner spot, and I think if they try to bring enough at Corral, it could make life, miserable for him during that game. Right now, I just don't trust the Ole Miss defense, and that was something we discussed earlier in the season. Maybe they had turned the corner, maybe their defense is playing a little better. I still just don't trust them, and you're playing up against a Texas A&M team. Look, I know how the game went against Auburn when it comes to points. I get that part. But if you look at that game, they pretty much dominated the Tigers. And they tried to do that with the running game, and they did that with Calzada. So I think ultimately that game comes down to who's healthy or not when it comes to Ole Miss's offense. And, Texas A&M is going to do their damnedest to try to put as much pressure as they can on Matt Corral. And if that happens, I don't know if Lane Kiffin can scheme out of what Texas A&M is going to do.
Who do you trust more this week, Auburn or Mississippi State?
Brother, that's tough.
I think that's one to me that you probably go with the home team, and that's Auburn, because Auburn hasn't been great on the road. But that's 2 teams that, like, God help you if you can figure out what you're going to get from either any week.
Well, Mississippi State shot themselves in the foot at Fayetteville numerous times. But I where does this Auburn team go from here? Coming off that loss to the Aggies. I think, with the way Mike Leach plays football, man, they just don't care. They come out every game. They're going to sling it around if they can. Will Rogers is going to do his thing. And that makes me wonder if the Auburn secondary can keep up, with the Bulldogs. But looking at it, if Tank Bigsby can run the football, Bo Nix can make plays outside the pocket. I think Auburn can pull that game out, just because I don't think you're going to be able to throw the ball 45 times on Auburn.
Has LSU got one more in the tank? I mean, that team has just been up and down. It's in LSU that helps, but Arkansas, frankly, has just, I think, really been consistent all year.
I love this game. We always it's the boot or the whatever,
Yeah.
the state. Yeah, this game, and it's usually on Thanksgiving in the past and whatnot, but this game is always fun. I think LSU does have something left in the tank. I think that they saw how they played last week in Tuscaloosa, and they get to come home and they get to play an Arkansas team and get a nice win, over the Razorbacks. I still think there's enough in the tank here. And you know what? Something else proved to me this past weekend. Things might not have gone LSU's way for most of the season, but I think that they are playing their darndest for Ed Orgeron in his final 2-3 games of the season. And I think you're going to see that on Saturday against Arkansas. I could see LSU winning that football game, though, Sam Pittman wouldn't surprise me if old Pitt goes in there and does something against, the Tigers. But honestly, I feel like if they can control KJ Jefferson, then the Tigers could end up winning that game and maybe send off Edo with, nice couple wins.
What was Ed Orgeron doing when he left the field in Tuscaloosa?
He was saying, "Thank you, Alabama fans, for the last number of years. I appreciate it. I love you." When he was giving up the "I love you" signals, pointing to his chest. You know what, man? There's a quirky respect for Ed Orgeron in this conference. And I think fans in all bases of the country, for some reason, they like the dude because he just feels kind of down homeish. He just sometimes it just sounds dumb, the things that comes out of his mouth. He just feels normal. And I'm look, when I say that, I'm not taking off for anything that's gone on behind the scenes at LSU, but I'm just talking about as the football coach. He was just going to act like that. That's Ed Orgeron, man. They lose the game. They kept it close. He probably made a bunch of money for LSU fans that were betting the line of, 28 and whatnot. And he was like, screw it. I'm going to go out and I'm going to tell everybody I love them. So God bless Ed Orgeron.
He seems like the kind of guy that even if you're a complete stranger, he would want to work out with you.
Yeah, he'd pound 4 Red Bulls and want to work out and talk about stuff that we have no idea what he's talking about. That's just the guy Ed Orgeron is, and he's going to ride off into the $18 million sunset that he's going to make, and it is what it is, man. He just couldn't put it together down there in Tigerland after winning that national championship, but we'll see what. He might leave some NCAA problems on the doorstep on the way out. So we'll see how much they love him in a year or so.
Trey, I know you're up against a tight schedule today. Anything else with the SEC that's worth talking about today? Oh, we got basketball starting tomorrow. That might be a talking point. So
got basketball is here. Thank goodness. We love college basketball, Chris. So I'm excited to see what the Southeastern Conference brings this year, and all around the country. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't believe we're already here, to be honest with you. We just, we're doing football. We just got done with fall baseball, and now we're rolling right into college basketball. And you know what? This is one of those best times of the year where we've got, so much going on at one time in the college ranks, and it should be a good time. I look forward to this season. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, the league is just flush with freshman stars, especially at the guard. You got, potential game-changing point guards at Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama among freshmen. You got a 5-star power forward at Auburn, who a lot of people think is an all-SEC player. But I want to ask about a guy in your backyard. Kennedy Chandler, a lot of people just are raving about him. I've not seen him play yet. What does he mean to Tennessee this year?
A lot, because you're getting that true point guard situation that I don't think you have with Jaden Springer, and I don't think you have with Keon Johnson last year. I think you got a pure point guard whose ability to pass the ball it's breathtaking, and I would say that about a lot of point guards in the country. But I've gotten to see that, and I think the way that he's going to be able to play off guys like Santiago Vescovi or Josiah Jordan-James, or you got John Fulkerson, but what he brings is stability at that spot where they're not having to rearrange. You remember last year, sometimes it was Keon Johnson bringing it up, sometimes it was Jaden, sometimes it was Santiago Vescovi. You don't have that problem now. You've also got Ziegler, a kid that's coming in from New York City that Tennessee found late, Zakai Ziegler, and I think he's going to be good in that backup role, to Chandler. So I know Tennessee fans are excited. College basketball fans should be excited. We're only going to get to see Kennedy Chandler for about 6 months, maybe. So enjoy him while you can. But I look forward to watching a lot of great basketball in this conference this year.
Trey, you and I will catch up again next week. Tell people where they can follow your social media accounts and just whatever you've got coming at Outkick.
Absolutely. Already got some stuff going on this week with Dan Mullen and Kirby Smart. You can follow me at Trey Wallace _ on Twitter. Follow all my work at Outkick.com. Chris, always a pleasure. Appreciate you having me on, my man, and I look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, always fun. He's Trey Wallace. I'm Chris Lee. Thanks for watching us over here at the 14. We'll see you again very soon.